friend blames everything on ADHD. Hello, and welcome. I'd like to share a personal story that's been weighing on me lately. It involves a close friend, someone I've known for a long time, who's been attributing nearly every issue in her life to her ADHD diagnosis, and how that's triggering a range of emotions in me. Perhaps by opening up about this, I can process some of those feelings and decide the best path forward. My friend and I are both 31 years old, so we're well past the days of just figuring out adulthood. A few years ago, she moved abroad with her husband. Now, by coincidence, we're both living in the same city again. She's been in this country for 3 years, but as far as I know, she hasn't held a job here. When she first arrived, she started complaining about not finding work, and I tried to be supportive. However, it soon became apparent that her lack of progress was partly due to not knowing the local language. She did enroll in a language course, which I thought was a great first step, but she quit after just 2 months, citing that it was too stressful. Since then, she's been stuck in a kind of limbo, wanting a job but not taking the steps necessary to become employable. It's hard to watch because I've been there myself, facing challenges in life and trying to find solutions. But what's even more difficult is how she handles stress and responsibility. Not long ago, she received a diagnosis of ADHD in under 2 weeks, something that usually requires a more extended evaluation process. She then started taking medication for it. While mental health diagnoses and treatments can vary greatly from one individual to another, the speed of her diagnosis caught my attention. Right away, she began attributing every struggle to ADHD. Can't finish a book, must need a higher dose of medication, can't stay focused in a course. Up the dosage once again. Every time she and her husband argue, it's the ADHD causing her irritability. She even goes so far as to say she cannot live without the medication. Now, I'm not dismissing the legitimacy of ADHD. It's a real condition that can be debilitating. Plenty of people genuinely need medication to manage their symptoms. However, in her case, it feels like she's using this diagnosis as a catch-all excuse for everything, without attempting behavioral changes, therapy, or effort in her daily life. From what I observe, she's shifted from not addressing the underlying issues to assuming medication alone will magically solve them. This is most evident in her interactions with her husband. She can be unkind or easily triggered, and instead of trying to address the root causes of that behavior, she'll simply say something like, "I had ADHD, so this is who I am." That attitude can come across as an abdication of responsibility for the way she treats people, especially someone as close as her spouse. I, on the other hand, have borderline personality disorder, BPD. In my younger years, receiving that diagnosis was a catalyst for a long, grueling journey of therapy and self-improvement. Anyone familiar with BPD knows it can be incredibly challenging. Learning to manage emotional dysregulation, fear of abandonment, and other symptoms is a serious undertaking that requires commitment, often years of therapy, lifestyle changes, and inner work. I'm far more stable now, but it didn't happen overnight or by simply popping a pill. It took a combination of therapy, personal growth, finding the right support network, and a willingness to address my flaws head-on. So, from the vantage point of someone who spent a lot of time in therapy and knows the struggle of working on deep-rooted issues, it's jarring to see my friend put such immense focus on medication as a quick fix. I'm not against medication. It can be a lifesaver when used appropriately. But medication alone, without effort to build coping strategies or adjust behavior, only goes so far. The more I listen to her complaints, the more frustrated I become. She frequently claims, "I need to learn the language to get a job," then quits after a short attempt, labeling it too stressful. Her husband tries to be supportive, but she lashes out and blames it on ADHD. There's never a step back to evaluate, maybe I'm being unfair, or maybe I need to communicate better or manage my stress differently. Instead, she leans on the diagnosis. I can't help it. It's ADHD. It's reached a point where her constant complaints and lack of responsibility are draining my empathy. I feel guilty for being annoyed, because as someone with BPD, I know all too well that mental health conditions can truly limit a person's functioning. But I also know that growth is possible if you put in the work. No, it's not easy, but change rarely is. Every time she complains about not being able to concentrate, I can't help but think back to my own journey. Therapy sessions, nights spent wrestling with self-destructive thoughts, practicing emotional regulation techniques, and making a concerted effort to reshape my life. There's an aspect of me that wants to shake her gently and say, You are so much more capable than you're allowing yourself to be. Medication can help, but you've got to put in the work, too. She appears to want everything to magically change without her having to push herself. That's not how improvement usually works, especially in the realm of mental health. If there's one core lesson I learned managing my own condition, it's that medication and professional support are tools. Valuable, necessary tools, yes, but they don't replace active participation and self-awareness. You must be willing to do the hard stuff. Face your anxieties, tolerate distress, and practice new habits. Sometimes I wonder if part of the reason she's stuck is that she's in a foreign country, isolated from the environment she's familiar with. It's certainly stressful, and maybe she feels overwhelmed by the transition, but that doesn't account for how she's turned ADHD into the scapegoat for every single adversity. Living abroad can be tough. Learning a new language is daunting, and adapting to a new culture can be isolating. However, none of that precludes addressing one's mental health responsibilities and making an effort to build a better future. I hate to admit it, but I've thought about stepping back from our friendship. Lately, whenever we talk, it's mostly her venting about how she can't do this or that because of ADHD, with no sign of her trying other coping mechanisms. The conversation rarely goes both ways. It's more like I'm her sounding board while she refuses to consider that maybe she needs more robust support. A different therapist, for instance, or a structured program to learn the local language, or simply more patience and resilience. It's draining to hear the same complaints day after day, especially when I suspect she's not open to suggestions. She either dismisses them or blames ADHD. Some days, I feel like her negativity affects my own mental health. I find myself getting irritated, and then I feel ashamed for that irritation. After all, mental health conditions aren't a joke, but still, something about her approach feels off to me. I've decided to take this issue to my own therapist next week. I'm tired of feeling caught between empathy for a friend and frustration over how she's handling, or not handling, her condition. My therapist has been an invaluable resource in helping me navigate difficult emotions, and I trust that we can unpack my conflicting feelings about this situation. On one hand, I do understand how debilitating mental health issues can be. On the other hand, I know real change often requires more than just taking pills. It also demands time, self-reflection, and active participation in therapy. It's possible that I'm being too harsh or critical because of my own experiences, or maybe I'm correctly perceiving that my friend is stuck in a cycle of using ADHD as an excuse to avoid growth. Possible paths forward: open communication. I could try having a candid, empathetic conversation with her about how I feel. Tell her that while I acknowledge ADHD is real, I also believe in her ability to learn coping strategies beyond just adjusting medication. This might be risky. She could feel judged or defensive, but it might also open a door to a more constructive approach. Encourage professional help. If she hasn't already, maybe she needs to find a well-rounded mental health team, therapists, psychiatrists, or ADHD specialists who can guide her more effectively. A quick diagnosis in 2 weeks seems incomplete. Encouraging her to explore deeper therapy and consistent checkups could help her gain the skills she needs to manage her symptoms. Set boundaries. If every conversation drains me and triggers negative emotions, I have to protect my own mental health. This might mean limiting how often we talk about her struggles. I could gently suggest we chat about other topics or focus on positive aspects, or I could reduce the frequency of our calls until I feel more balanced. Step back. Worst case scenario: if her negativity continues unchecked, and I find myself slipping into a negative headspace, I might need more space in our friendship. That doesn't mean abandoning her. It just means recognizing my emotional limits. After all, part of staying healthy with borderline personality disorder is knowing when I've reached my threshold for stress and negativity. Why do I feel guilty about all this? Because I know firsthand how it feels to be overwhelmed by a mental health disorder. I've been that person who struggled to function, who sometimes wanted others to just understand my pain and not judge me. At the same time, though, I also know that staying in a state of inertia, waiting for some magical shift, doesn't bring real, lasting improvement. So there's this internal conflict. I want to be understanding, but I can't ignore the fact that she seems unwilling to help herself beyond medication. I've learned the hard way that medication is just one part of a holistic approach. Without therapy, introspection, and lifestyle changes, progress is limited. It frustrates me to see her repeating the same patterns and not taking the necessary steps to move forward. especially if she's harming her marriage in the process. I'm torn about what our friendship will look like going forward. We've known each other for years, and I'd like to keep that bond if possible, but I also need to safeguard my own mental well-being, though I've decided to take it day by day. For now, I'll mention this issue in my next therapy session. Be honest with myself about my emotional boundaries, and see if there's a healthier way to approach our interactions. Maybe after talking it through, I'll be able to have a compassionate but direct conversation with her. Or maybe I'll decide it's best to step back, at least for a while. Either way, I know I can't continue with the status quo of constant venting and blaming ADHD for every frustration in her life. It isn't healthy for either of us. For anyone out there who might be listening or reading this and relating to parts of it, maybe you have a friend who's dealing with a mental health condition and you're frustrated by their approach. Or perhaps you're the one who's been recently diagnosed and you're feeling a mix of relief and fear. It's worth remembering that conditions like ADHD, borderline personality disorder, and countless others are very real, but the path to managing them is often complex. Medication can be transformative, but it's rarely the only solution. If this resonates with you, know that seeking professional guidance is never a bad idea. Talking to a therapist about your frustrations and boundaries can prevent resentment from building up. Communication, honesty, and self-care are crucial. I can't say exactly what the right path is for everyone, but I know that ignoring the problem, or hoping it will solve itself, usually isn't the answer. As I step forward into my own therapy session, I'm holding on to the hope that there's a constructive way to navigate this situation, one that preserves my well-being, respects my friend's challenges, and maybe even motivates her to take more proactive steps. Until then, I'll keep reminding myself, it's okay to feel frustrated, and it's also okay to set limits on how much negativity I can handle. Ultimately, both of us deserve a healthier, more balanced dynamic. If that means a difficult conversation or a temporary break, so be it. Because in the end, caring for our own mental health is essential, even when we love and care about our friends.